we're going to talk about the health and well-being of first responders and the importance of your teaching your students how to take care of themselves. A lot of what I talk about today is probably stuff you guys already know, things you've experienced. But if I can give you just one tool to take home to use with your students, that will make this worthwhile. My kids, I call them my kids. They're used to it. As I said, I told them very early on, I'm the mama duck, you're my baby ducklings. So they all walk around calling themselves my ducklings. But I always tell them and their parents that my most important role and what is most important to me in my class is making sure that their physical and mental health is being taken care of. And so, yes, we are going to put these kids on an ambulance and we are going to put them in the ER and we are going to expose them to some things that they've never seen before. And the parents need to know that through every step of that, I am only putting them with people I trust to look out for them. So we all know we have the best job in the world, right? I mean, it's awesome. We get to do what we do. It is a privilege to serve our community. But we also know that our personal health, wellness, and safety is absolutely integral to what we do, right? If we aren't healthy, we can't help the people around us. The hazards we see every day vary greatly. And perhaps one of our biggest mistakes is we get so used to those routine calls. Oh, here we go again. Another BLS transport. Oh, here we go again. Another alarm, that when the real stuff hits, we're not ready for it. We get dulled into a sense of complacency. Mental and physical stressors are part of the job, and we have to teach our students, if you don't take care of yourselves, you can't take care of others. And now I'm going to look out at all of you, and I'm going to say that again. If you don't take care of yourselves, you can't take care of others. Okay? You cannot go into that classroom if you are not right in your body, mind, and spirit, right? I actually had a pretty serious mental crisis 18 months ago, and I almost missed an entire month of class. Okay? So, be taking care of yourself. So, why are we talking about stress? It's part of life. We always say, oh, you can avoid a heart attack by limiting your stress. Really? Okay, stress can't be avoided. We want to minimize burnout and stress injuries, maintain our health and wellness, and we want to lengthen our careers. Now, it's really cool to be in this room and hear all these people who are like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for 25 years, I've been doing this for 40 years. I think that's awesome. Okay, as I said, it was my midlife crisis, and that only happened 2 weeks ago. But, we want these teenagers who are coming in who are all excited and happy. We want them to be with us for a long time, okay, not to burn out. And, of course, we want to lessen the strain on their relationships. So we do need to be aware of this stuff. Personality traits of the first responder. We want to help, right? That's what we do. We put others before ourselves. We're active. How many of you love sitting at a desk all day? That's what I thought. Okay. We're very much take charge. We're in control of situations. Your typical type A personality. We like excitement. We like adrenaline. We like new situations. Hey, you want to go jump out of an airplane? Sure, sounds great. Okay. We are very much fixers, right? We go in and we fix stuff. That's what we do. We're results-oriented. We expect positive outcomes. We endure hardship without complaint, right? I mean, I love those pictures that we see like up in Boston of the firefighters putting out a fire in the middle of January with like icicles hanging off their helmets. I mean, you guys do that without thinking twice about it, right? We run into burning buildings. We carry 350-pound people downstairs. It's what we do. We don't moan and groan about it, okay? And we value excellence. And I think that's something else we bring to our kids, but we need to be careful how we bring that excellence to them. So we know the three components of well-being are always mind, body, and spirit, right? Physical, mental, emotional, however you want to talk about it, okay? And emergencies have some very emotional aspects to them. We have to keep our emotions under control at the scene, okay? Because if we fall apart, that doesn't help the family, right? Even those of us who have been doing this for years still have tough emotions that we deal with after it's over, right? After the emergency passes. And I think sometimes we forget to share that with the kids, right? You come off a tough call and you're like, wow, that sucked. And you know to go talk to somebody about it, and you're hanging out with your buddies and you guys are rehashing the call and doing your, debrief or your hot wash. But we forget to tell the kids about that. We forget to say, hey, we've had bad calls, right? I know the question we hate the most, right? You're at a barbecue and somebody goes, oh, you're a firefighter? What's the worst call you've ever been on? And you're like, I don't want to think about the worst call I've ever been on, right? Those are horrible, but that's what everybody wants to know. But we forget to tell our high schoolers, hey, there have been tough calls and you guys are going to have them along the way. There is some peer pressure not to show that we have emotions, right? We're tough, we suck it up. And there is unfortunately still the stigma of needing help. Now, one of the things that I love about my high schoolers is this generation is more open to the concept of mental health than any generation before it. Okay, it's awesome. They're willing to talk about it. And when I bring it up, I don't get eye rolls. Okay, sometimes I feel like more than talking to our high schoolers, we need to talk to their parents because their parents don't get it as much. But they're open to this, but there is still that stigma out there. Okay, and we need to be aware of that. So our self-control is achieved through our proper training, our experience, our dedication to serving others, right? Those are the things that make us who we are, that teach us how to be in control of our emotions at the time. And we need to teach that to our kids, right? They need to understand that they may go on a call that's tough and not be able to handle it the first time. That it's our experience and what we've been doing that helps us get there. So let's talk really quick about what stress is, because I think sometimes we forget. Stress is any change in the body's internal balance, okay? It's what goes on as things change in our lives. And there's two types. There's good stress, the eustress, okay? And there's distress, which is when people think of stress, what we think of, right? That we automatically go to the distress place, okay? So our eustress is pleasant or curative. It's controlled stress that gives us an advantage and brings us positive capabilities that we can bring to a situation, okay? So for example, when we are challenged by something, it may be stressful, but that's how we grow, right? We're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And then we fight through it, and then we get to the end, and we're like, yes! And how many of you have ever seen your high schoolers do that, right? You put a task in front of them, and you put 3 or 4 of them on it, and they're like, wait, we have to what? And then they get to the end and they're like, yes, we did it, okay? That is stress, but it's eustress, it's positive stress, okay? Distress is the disease-producing stress, right? That's the stuff that makes us sick, okay? So for example, many, many years ago, last week, my ex-husband and I were moving, expecting a new baby, and he was changing jobs. 3 very good things, right? But one of his friends, who was a psychologist, was like, on the life stress scale right now, you should be having a heart attack, okay? So even those good things can be overwhelming at times, and that uncontrolled stress, like overwork, underpaid, crazy hours, not knowing when you're gonna get home to your family next, okay, being held over, right? That's the one that we really need to avoid. So there's 3 types of stress reactions. We've got our acute, okay? That's the one that hits during or right after the incident, right? When you get off the incident and you have that adrenaline dump, okay? Anybody ever come off an incident shaking, right? Realizing that, wow, okay, I just lost all the adrenaline I had, okay? You may feel overwhelmed. It's very common in our critical incidents, right? Flip a fire engine, the one that they showed yesterday, the guy falls out the door, right? Okay, those critical incidents, those usually are acute stress reactions, and they're the things that come on immediately. Then we have our delayed stress reactions. Those are the ones that come back and get us 2 nights later, a week later, a month later, okay? Sometimes they are the result of multiple incidents building up, right? How many of you have ever had a really crummy week at the firehouse? And you get to the end of that week and you're like, oh God, I hope I never have a week like that again, right? But because you've had all those incidents with no breaks in between them to like relax and reset, you get this buildup, okay? So nightmares, flashbacks, insomnia, we call this post-traumatic stress, right? Okay, and one of the things that I want you guys to remember is that post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder are 2 different things, okay? Lots of people have post-traumatic stress. Lots of people work through it and come back to their jobs okay, all right? Post-traumatic stress disorder is also something that you can work through and, make sure that you're, going to your counseling and taking your medications and doing all the things you need to do to take care of you and you can come back from. But that is a much longer term incident, right? That's when you've tried to work through it and you haven't gotten there yet. Okay, we will see depression or anxiety, okay? Hyperarousal, flashbacks. Sometimes they just get mood swings and they get mad at everything, right? And if you ever have a teen or a partner who suddenly starts avoiding a certain person, thing, or place, you might want to dig into that a little deeper. Okay, our third type of stress reaction is the cumulative stress reaction. That is your buildup of stress over long periods of time. It is most commonly known as burnout. And how many of you know someone in the fire service who has burned out? Okay, this is why we're talking about this. We are trying to avoid this. This is where they get to the point where they just don't care. And they become a danger not only to themselves, but to everyone else on the scene, okay? So those are our 3 types of stress reactions. We do have lots of work stress in what we do, right? As I mentioned, many of our calls are routine. We get numbed into thinking everything's easy, okay? And then you have one of those calls that produce extreme amounts of stress. I remember when I was brand new in the firehouse, every time those tones dropped, I'd get an adrenaline rush, right? Where are we going? What are we doing? Okay, now the tones drop and I'm like, okay, here we go. But the minute I hear pediatric code, my stress goes through the roof, right? In fact, they don't even have to say code. The minute it becomes a pediatric call, because if you guys can't tell, I'm a mom and kids are kind of my thing. Okay, anything that's pediatric, that adrenaline spike, right? Because I want to get there as fast as I can, make sure the baby's okay and get them to the hospital. So things like infant, elder, or spouse abuse, okay, none of us like to see those. Serious injuries or traumatic death of a child. If you know the patient, how many of you work in small rural areas where everybody knows everybody, right? Okay. A team member injury or death, obviously that's traumatic. Or a crash caused by emergency response. We had a very unfortunate incident in our area a couple months ago now. Fire and EMS got called out in the middle of the night for an EDP. And they were on their way to the incident. They were trying to find the patient. They had gotten to the general area, so they weren't even going emergency response anymore. They were just trying to find the patient. And she jumped in front of the engine. And, I mean, you guys can imagine the kind, they killed her, right? Instead of death by cop, it was death by fire. Okay. And I know the driver of that engine, and he was understandably completely torn up, right? I mean, oh my God. So those are the kinds of things that can bring huge amounts of stress. It's not his fault. There was nothing he could have done different. It was the middle of the night, so it was dark, and all he had was his headlights. He never saw her until just as she jumped in front of him. Okay? So those kinds of things produce extreme levels of stress. So we go from the really routine, boring, to heightened amounts of stress in the flick of a switch. Pop quiz, who knows what the most stressful job in the United States is? Teaching. Not teaching, actually, but anybody know? Y'all are talking like this, I can't hear you. You got to shout it out.
Explosive ordnance disposal?
Hey, that would be a good one, but it's actually not, because they're prepped for that, right? As a mom, I would agree. It's actually air traffic controller. Because, again, they spend the majority of their days bored to tears, right? American Airlines, flight 339. Yep, you're flying steady at 30,000 all day long. And then an emergency hits. And now you're not responsible for one person, you're responsible for 358. Okay? So it is that big jump between boredom and extreme stress that causes the most damage. So, I know, again, this is a slide you all know, right? What a critical incident is. It's a situation that causes any sort of unusually strong emotional response. It's going to be different for each of us, right? What's a critical incident for me may be totally different from what a critical incident is for Chris, okay? It does have the potential to interfere with the personnel's ability to function. It can affect one member or the whole team, okay? If all of you are on an active violent incident, perhaps the entire team is stressed out. Okay. However, if one of you on that AVI happens to be, for example, a Marine veteran, he may be like, yep, been there, done that, right? So it just depends. Okay. Critical incidents can, again, be one or several. You can have a critical incident week, or you can just have one critical incident. But they can cause both acute and delayed stress. So, some of our stress signs and symptoms: not being able to think. Okay? I will tell you guys, I got to the end of this school year and I was trying to get my students prepped for the National Registry, and I could not keep a straight thought in my head. I'd start one thought and something else would jump in and I wouldn't be able to get back to that first one. I was a little stressed this year about National Registry. Luckily, they all got through in one piece. Obviously, our psychological issues that we're used to, right? Depression, anger, mood swings, avoidance, withdrawing. Physical, headaches, exhaustion, dizziness for no apparent reason. Increased interpersonal conflicts, yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of background. I've been on antidepressants since my son was 2.5. It took us that long to figure out I had postpartum depression. I have tried multiple times to go off those antidepressants, usually when I was like, oh, I'm feeling better, I don't need these now. And then one day my daughter would say, Mommy, why do you always yell at us? Oh, time to get back on those antidepressants. Okay, so you may not recognize the change in yourself, but someone else might. Our most common symptoms are insomnia, right? Can't sleep or sleeping at the wrong times. Irritability, tachycardia, upset stomach and loss of appetite, and headaches. The physiological manifestations of acute stress: rise in respirations and pulse, increase in blood pressure, cool, clammy skin, dilated pupils, tense muscles, and decreased appetite or slower digestion. All my EMTs in the room, we call this what? What?
Panic attack.
Panic attack or a sympathetic response, right? This is your sympathetic nervous system taking over, and when your sympathetic nervous system is in charge all the time, you never get out of your fight, flight, or freeze symptoms, right? Okay, so strategies to manage stress, make healthy lifestyle changes, find activities outside of fire and EMS. Okay, how many of you hang out with all your station buddies on the weekend? Okay, find other outlets. Enlist the support of family and friends. They're there. Make changes to your work environment if necessary, and seek professional help. These are the kinds of things we need to be talking to our students about. Okay, what do you do when your stress gets too high? So, healthy lifestyle changes. Learn to relax is not crossed out. That was a PowerPoint error. That's just supposed to be a line. So, eat a well-balanced diet, exercise, learn to relax. So, box breathing, meditation, taking a walk, playing with your dog, right? Those simple things. Avoid self-medication, which is our most common coping method. Yes, it's the most common. Okay, again, teach your kids to avoid that one. Expand your social support system and have a hobby outside of work. One of the things that you guys need to recognize, we talk to our students about not getting on the ambulance when they're sick, right? Because when they're sick, their immune system is depleted, and so anything their patients have, they can catch, right? Plus, our patients are on the ambulance because their immune system is depleted, and so we can give it to them. So don't get on the ambulance when you're sick, right? Or the fire truck, okay? What we forget is that prolonged stress drains your body's reserves just as easily as an illness or an injury does. If your student or you are too stressed out, your body is open and waiting for infection, all right? So, this is another one of those reasons we have to take care of ourselves, because we're not just putting ourselves in fires, we're picking up people who have, thankfully now, mostly vaccinated COVID, but we have patients who have pneumonia, who have meningitis, who have communicable diseases. And when your body is stressed out, it can't fight that off. All right, make changes in your work environment. These are, by the way, some of my kids doing our stair climb last year. So develop a buddy system in class. You can either let the students pick their own buddies or just assign teams. Every year in my class, I create squads. I've got a class of 24, so I make up 4 squads of 6. And each of them has a team leader, but they do everything together during the year. And, you know, we do fun stuff. So, like, we do pumpkin carving every year, and each squad gets to carve their own pumpkins. Okay, but we also do, you know, like we'll do a Jeopardy day, and the squads will play against each other and stuff like that. So, but it's a good way, you're taking that group of 24 and you're breaking them into smaller groups so that they have their own set of people that they hang out with. I do full class building, team building stuff too, but I like to get them into smaller groups. Teach them to watch out for each other. Okay, one of the ways I realized I was on the edge of a mental crisis was I was teaching at the academy one night, because I also teach at the academy, not just at the high school. I was teaching at the academy one night, and I might have gone a little overboard with a rant. I was in a safe place, I knew that, okay. But I started ranting about some stuff that was going on, and then we went into work with the students, and one of my friends and fellow teachers walked over and he went, "Hey, are you okay?" Now, what do we always say to that? "Yeah, I'm fine." But those 3 words stopped me in my tracks. And I looked at him and I said, "No, I'm not." And he was like, "All right, what do you need?" And that's that kind of stuff we've got to teach our kids, to talk to each other. "Hey, are you okay? This is not you. You're not acting normal," right? Because really, I mean, I'm not kidding. It wasn't until Mike actually called me on my behavior that I realized where I was emotionally, Okay, and for those of you who have taken stress first aid, I was very solidly in the orange zone at that point. Okay, I was in a stress injury point and I was headed towards a stress illness. And it was only because Mike called me on it. So teach your kids within their groups, or if they just have a buddy or whatever, teach your kids to say to each other, hey, are you okay? Just checking in, okay? Encourage and support all efforts and celebrate wins. We have a star chart in my room. I'm not kidding. I know we're teaching high schoolers, but I swear most of them are kindergartners in their heads, okay? So like there was nothing that got my kids more excited than telling them they'd get a star on the star chart if they did well at whatever we were doing. Like we did an escape room and the squad that got done in the escape room first, each got stars and they were so excited. Okay, so celebrate wins, however you want to do it. I use a star chart. Okay, take a break to move or get exercise. We call that PT, right? I PT with my kids every day. Create a structure that allows times to relax and recover. Okay, so after a stressful incident going on in the class, because there are stressful things that happen in a classroom. Okay, for example, their first FISDAP test. Wow, their brains melted. Okay, just absolutely melted. And as soon as all the students had finished that FISDAP test, we went outside and PT'd because I knew they needed to get out and run, right? Okay? If you notice an issue between students, tackle it as soon as possible. Do not think the kids are going to handle it on their own. These are kids. Their prefrontal cortexes are not fully developed, right? Don't let them try to work it out on their own. Whether you address it as a group, a full class, without naming names and just going, hey, this is what I've been seeing and, let's work on this and make sure it doesn't happen. Or whether you take those two students and pull them aside and say, hey, let's talk about this, what's going on? Okay, if there is a situation going on, tackle it. Don't let it fester. And then daily check-ins. Now, what I did was I made, like the Avery labels, right? Okay. I used the Avery label template because it was just the right size and I just put normal paper in. But all of my students had a green card, a yellow card, and a red card with their name on it. And in my class, they have inboxes and outboxes. They turn their homework into the inbox, and I take it out. And then when I return stuff to them, I put it in their outboxes. And so I put their cards in their outboxes every day. And when they would come in first thing in the morning and check for any materials that I had returned to them, they would grab the appropriate card. Green meant, good to go, glad to be here, excited for the day. Cool. Okay, yellow was, I'm here, I'm trying. Okay, and red was, there is something going on in my life right now. Okay, and I had a basket on my desk and they just all brought them up and dropped their cards in and wouldn't you know that usually the kids who dropped the red cards in would turn them face down so nobody else could see the name on it, which I get, right? They don't want to advertise that, but they still want to let me know. Okay, and every day they would drop their cards on my desk. So my green cards, I just stuck aside, cool, my kids are good to go. My yellow cards I'd kind of keep track of. Okay, today's a rough day. Let's see how the next couple days go. Okay. If I started seeing a trend in yellow cards, I'd usually kind of grab my student and pull them aside and be like, hey, I've noticed for the past couple classes you've been putting yellow in. Is everything going okay? Okay. My red cards got a visit from me immediately. Okay. When nobody else was watching, I'd just walk over, sit down, squat down next to them at their desk and be like, hey, noticed a red card, you doing okay? I didn't ask what was going on. I'd just say, are you doing okay? And they would tell me as much or as little as they wanted to. So for example, one day one of my students said, my grandmother's in hospice. They don't expect her to live to the end of the week. Yeah, that's a red day. I agree 100%. But what that allowed me to do, because that was a skills day when I had my assistant instructors come in, that allowed me to go around to each of my assistant instructors and go, hey, so-and-so's having a really rough day. Her grandmother's in hospice. If she seems disengaged, please just let her be. because for that day, she didn't need to be yelled at and told to keep her head in the game, right? She needed to deal with what was going on. And I also said to her, if you need me, you come get me. And if you need to take a break and go to the bathroom, you can do that too, right? If she suddenly feels like she's going to break down crying, by all means, go to the bathroom. You don't need to let your entire class know about it. And I'm sure she told some of her friends, okay? But at least I knew what was going on, so I could watch out for her and keep an eye on her. Okay, we had a really traumatic year. One of my students, his sister, who was a year younger than him, went into a coded after a seizure, and they ended up having to pull her life support. Another one of my students called me and he's like, we had a house fire. I mean, like, my house is on fire. I was like, wait, what? Okay. And then, we had this girl who lost her grandmother. And I mean, wow, it was a crazy year in my class. Okay, so we had a lot of red cards. But that allowed me to stay on top of my students and know what was going on. You don't need to use that. That's what worked for me. But have some way that you're checking in with your kids every day. I think it was Jason said he greets his students at the door every day. Maybe that's all you need to see their face and be like, oh, that's not right. Okay, but that was my way of doing it. Daily check-ins. Seek professional help. So, we need to manage the stress in our lives and seek professional help, okay? But we are also first responders. I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody in here is a trained psychologist or psychiatrist. If you are, that's awesome, okay? But we are first responders. We make handoffs to qualified professionals. Okay, I did not, luckily, have a situation where I needed to hand any of my kids off to EAP or to the peer team or even send them to the counselor's office and be like, hey, you need to go talk to a counselor. Okay, but when that situation arises, recognize that your job, your step in the process is not to fix it and make it better, right? Your job is to go, okay, you know what, I know somebody you can talk to. Let's make that happen. Okay, and recognize that, qualified professionals can be as easy as a dietitian, a personal trainer, a massage therapist, okay? There's lots of different ways we can cope with stress. It's not necessarily going straight to a counselor, but have that, I know who you can talk to in your back pocket. Some resources for mental health, the National Crisis Hotline, call or text 988. Okay, so that is, for those of you who don't know, back in August of last year, 911 had stopped being the emergency number for medical health. It's now 988. And they do have social workers, trained clinicians, peer support, everything right online. So you can text or call them for help. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, has local support groups all over the country. You can go online, NAMI.org, find your closest group. The thing I like about them is they have lots of different peer support groups so that if you have someone who might need some long-term care, you can get them in with one of those groups where they're actually supporting each other, right? So like grieving parents, loss of a sibling, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, your department peer support team, if you have it, or an employee assistance program. Our students, because they're volunteers with our department, all qualify for the EAP. That may not be true where you are, but at least in our county, the volunteers are covered under the same employee assistance program as the career staff are. Mental health first aid for youth, you heard that's a class that that I teach. And then the Code Green campaign, which was started by a group of EMTs back in, I'm going to get the year wrong now, so don't ask. But it was started by a group of EMTs who were like, hey, suicide rates are just way too high among first responders. We need to figure out a way to get this under control. So the Code Green campaign. And then Share the Load is volunteer fire and EMS chiefs. And it's the same idea. It's a support program specifically aimed at firefighters and EMTs. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Have any of you ever walked into a counselor's office and had that counselor go, I'm not qualified to deal with this? okay? Which is why I like going with EAP, because our EAP has counselors who specifically work with fire and EMS. Okay, so your EAP, your peer-to-peer, any of those where you have people who understand the life of a firefighter and an EMT, okay? Because your average counselor doesn't see what we see every day. So make sure that you're sending them to someone who's actually qualified to listen to what they have to talk about. Okay, trauma-informed philosophy. How many of you have actually heard of trauma-informed care in the past? Anybody? Okay, good. Okay. So trauma-informed care is kind of a new thing, but our trauma-informed philosophy emphasizes the principles of trauma-informed care where a positive empathetic attitude is expected at all times. Okay, I'm sure all of you have heard and maybe even said, that chick was so crazy, right? Or my least favorite, suicide. Well, that's a problem that cures itself. Okay, guys, it's 2020. It's time to get on the mental health boat, okay? Recognize mental health is a big issue. Somebody asked, and I don't remember, and I feel bad about this, but how many of you can say that you've never had anything traumatic happen in your life? Okay, guess what? Your teenagers are going to tell you the same thing. Okay, recognize that probably 90% of the students that come into your class are dealing with some form of trauma. You probably won't ever know what it is. Okay, but 90% of your students have a traumatic background. In trauma-informed care, we call that standard precautions, right? Just like we assume every patient we come into contact with might have something communicable, therefore we wear gloves and masks and appropriate protection, we are going to assume that every person you come in contact with has had some sort of trauma. It could be food insecurity. It could be divorce. It could be abuse, right? You don't know what your kids are dealing with. I had a student come back to me after his senior year. It was his freshman year of college. This student was transgender, female to male. He was with me his senior year. He was one of my favorite students, I'll be honest. But he came in one day and I could tell things weren't right. And I went over and I sat down and I talked with him. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And so he kind of told me what was going on. And of course, our transgender teens have, even way more trauma than just our cisgender teens. But so he told me a little bit of what was going on. And I was like, hey, I'm here if you need anything, blah, 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 blah. So he came back the following year and he texted me and he's like, hey, I'm in town for break. Can we get together for lunch? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And we sat down and we're talking a little bit and he stopped and he said, hey, I need to tell you something. I said, okay. And he's like, I just want you to know you saved my life. Guys. And I was like, thank you. And he's like, no, really. He's like, you are the only reason I made it through my senior year alive. I didn't do anything. I asked him if he was doing okay. Right? I was just empathetic to the fact that he had not just the normal teenage stress, but a lot more stress going on. And he honestly felt that I was the reason he had made it through his senior year alive. It's not a hard job, guys. Ask them if they're okay. And teach them to look out for each other. Treat all of your students and patients as if they're family. Recognize that their perceptions are their reality, right? What they're perceiving is what's really happening to them. I've heard teachers go, what do teens have to be stressed about? Okay, those teachers don't remember what it was like to be a teen. I remember when I was a teen and everything was a life or death decision. Which college I was going to, what boy I was going to date. Did I even have a date for Friday night? Oh my God. And we look back on it now and we laugh and we're like, oh yeah, we were so overdramatic. Okay, maybe teens are overdramatic. Teens don't have fully formed frontal cortexes. I can say that word. Okay? To them, everything is life or death. And then you add the trauma that we don't see. Okay? Kids that come home and have to get all three of their younger siblings fed, homeworked, bathed, and into bed because mom's not home because she's working 3 jobs to keep a roof over their head. Teens aren't supposed to be the moms, but they are, the moms and dads. Okay, they are. You don't know the trauma that's going on in their background. Recognize that their perceptions are their reality, and we have to work within that. Ways to cope with stress. Find rewarding experiences from hobby, sports, recreation, right? We know that. I frequently would talk to my kids and I'd be like, hey, what makes you happy? Okay, go do that. Right? Go take a walk. Go camping this weekend. Call your best friend. Turn on your favorite music and go crazy. Okay? Find the humor in life. We all know we have some of the most inappropriate humor around, right? But when we laugh, it helps us release some of that stress, okay? So, again, I try to keep my class super light. I mean, I crack jokes all the time. Sometimes I'm the only one laughing at them because my teens think I'm an idiot. But I'm okay with that, okay? Take a mini vacation. Don't isolate yourself. And I will tell you that this is one of those things we need to watch with our teens. When you notice your teen is isolating themselves from the rest of the class, something is not right, okay? They may not say anything, but if you notice that suddenly they're not hanging out with the rest of the class or they're staying disengaged during group projects, it's time to check in. Get enough sleep? Okay. That's one of my favorites. Try, okay? And enjoy some recreation away from your firehouse. After a stressful situation or event, drink plenty of water. It's actually proven that drinking ice water helps lower your heart rate. So, Steph, none for you. So it actually helps lower your heart rate. Cold water helps slow your metabolism, okay? Avoid the use of alcohol and drugs. Don't kid yourselves. Your kids know where to get those, right? I know we all want to think, oh, my kids are so good. And our kids are great. I do tell everybody, I'm like, hey, I get to hang out with the 24 coolest high schoolers in Loudoun County every year. Okay, that is my line. But don't kid yourselves. They know where to get alcohol. They know where to get drugs, okay? Do everything you can to keep them away from that. Use relaxation techniques. We taught box breathing in my class. Okay, for those of you that don't know, box breathing was originated by the Navy SEALs. And I find that particularly helpful when I'm dealing with a bunch of rowdy firefighter boys who think they're too cool for school. And then I'm like, all right, well, the Navy SEALs use this, so you can too. Okay, so we taught box breathing in my class. Talk about what's happened and clear up any misunderstandings, right? And so that's a class thing. When something goes wrong in class, hot wash. Let's talk about what just happened and let's clear up, because somebody will go, well, you said or you did. And it's like, oh, I didn't mean it that way, right? So you've got to give them a chance to clear the air. Don't hesitate to call peer support, CISM or EAP, or in the schools, our counselors are awesome, and I can always call on my counselors and they'll come hang out in class with us if we need it. So in review, I actually got in under an hour. Yes. All right. So working as first responders, your students are going to face many stressful situations. Help them be prepared. When I do my orientation with the parents and the students in the spring for the fall class, I talk about the fact that being a first responder is very stressful. Okay, these kids, they're cocky, right? Oh, I can do anything. I'm ready for anything. I'm fine. Yeah, maybe not. So make sure that both the parents and the students understand what they're getting into. Okay, be aware of the signs and symptoms of stress and watch out for your students. Okay, and teach them to watch out for each other. There are signs, there are signs. There are ways to take care of yourself. So you do them and model self-care for your students. Okay? I kept myself out of the classroom for almost a month because I was not modeling healthy self-care for my kids. I could not be in the class and be in front of them in the state I was in. When I got better, I came back. So recognize that you need to be the model for your kids so they see it. Self-care is not selfish, it is a necessity, okay? And seek help when you need it. All right, and this is how you can contact me. You can contact me through Loudoun County or through Sterling Rescue. If you have questions about stress first aid, mental health first aid, or trauma-informed care, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. I do all 3 of these classes online, so if any of you want me to come into your classroom and do it via Zoom, I am happy to do those for you. So just let me know, okay? The more we talk to these kids about taking care of themselves and being ready for anything, the healthier they're going to be. Any questions? All right, thanks guys.